Hello lovelies, welcome to my channel. My name is Laura and today we're going to be talking about the scandalous life of Bettie Page. Bettie Page is one of the biggest pop culture influences of the 20th century. You see representations of Bettie all the time without even knowing it. Many have their roots in Bettie's pioneering work, from her infamous haircut to today's risque photos. Who was she to have made such a big splash in her time and ours? Let's start from the beginning. Bettie was born on April 22nd, 1923 in Nashville, Tennessee. Looking at her photos and careers, many would have never guessed that Bettie suffered a terrible childhood. She was one of 6 kids, one of 3 girls. Her father worked to support them, but they were poor. There was no welfare or food stamps back then, so they had to make do with what they had. But her father was not some noble man who worked so his kids could have a better life. He would push Bettie constantly every day to let him touch her, just like he had to do with his other daughters. Bettie eventually gave in to her father, and in return he gave her money for the movies. She claimed that she would never let it go too far, but unfortunately things progressed more with her sisters. To make matters worse, she could not even turn to her mother for help and safety. According to Bettie, her mother never wanted girls, claiming that they were more trouble than they were worth. Perhaps this was because she knew what her husband was doing and she took her emotions out on her daughters. Either way, Bettie reported that her mother had never hugged her more than once. She was stuck in a cycle of emotional trauma from her mother and abuse from her father. In 1934, when Bettie was 11, her mother decided to take the children and leave her father. This was incredibly uncommon at the time, as most women were unable to get jobs. Bettie's mother struggled to find work and could not take care of her children, so they were sent to an orphanage. Some sources claim that Bettie stayed in foster care until she was 18. Others say that she went back to her mother's care at some point. Regardless of where she was, Bettie excelled in school. She was bright, resourceful, and charismatic. She graduated high school second in her class. Most people would be extremely excited to achieve this honor, but unfortunately Bettie was devastated. The person who graduated at the top of their class received a full scholarship to the college of their choice. Second prize, however, was only a $100 scholarship to a teaching school. $100 back then brought more education than it does today, but is still not equal to a full ride. Nevertheless, Bettie went and got a teaching credit, but she was not in the profession for long. She had no passion for teaching and could not control her students. So she went back to George Peabody College to get a degree in acting. When Bettie and her sisters were younger, they taught themselves to sew and do their own makeup. They simply did not have the money to go on shopping sprees, but Bettie became really good at designing and creating clothes. And when her career did take off, many of the bikinis and lingerie that she's seen in, she sewed herself. She started off in what were known as camera clubs at the time. It was illegal to sell or mail nude images, so these clubs were set up and disguised as art. The models would work in bikinis or fully nude, and men would come to photograph them. When Bettie worked at these clubs, she designed her own outfits and did her own makeup. But this is not the version of Bettie that everyone would come to know. She spent some time in New York City working hard to get rid of her Tennessee accent, which would have cost her jobs and opportunities. There she met police officer Tibbs, who had a passion for photography. She agreed to model for him for free, and he would make her portfolio to use. It was at this photo shoot that he suggested that she give herself bangs to frame her face. This was the infamous haircut that rocketed her to stardom. From there, she got various modeling jobs and pinup shoots. Her career officially started in 1950, a period of political and sexual repression. But Bettie was not going to let this stop her, and in fact she wanted to push the boundaries set in front of her. She posed nude on beaches, in hotels, and bathtubs. She did shoots in lingerie and bikinis, some homemade. She was best known for some of the bondage photo shoots she did. Conservatives in the country were enraged at seeing a woman so happily embracing her sexuality and feeling free to express herself. The federal government even got involved, holding hearings which type of pornography was considered legal. Bettie was used as an example of what should not be allowed, but this was eventually overruled. Nothing could stop her from becoming famous except for herself. She did not want to be famous, she merely enjoyed what she was doing. She also loved the fact that she was becoming a voice of repressed women everywhere. She even credited with being the original queen of pinup girls. Despite how well her career is remembered, it only lasted 7 years. In 1957, Betty retired. She was 34 years old and still pretending to be 22. She had had enough of being famous and didn't really want to be in the spotlight to begin with. And she was okay with never being in the spotlight again. Aside from feeling too old, her personal life was not exactly picturesque. Before her career, she had married and divorced her first husband. During her modeling days, she had married again, but they divorced quickly. Her husbands wanted to control her, but she did not want to be tamed. In the 1960s, she had married again, but got another divorce. Allegedly, she had threatened her husband with a knife, but there's no official evidence to support that. She was living on her own, virtually penniless, when she assaulted her landlord. The landlord had come to her apartment to collect the rent and Betty attacked her. Prior to this, everyone had assumed that Betty was dead. She dropped out of the public eye without a word, so no one knew she was still around. Betty did not go to jail for her crimes by reason of insanity, but she was sentenced to 10 years in a mental institution. It was while she was locked away that her infamy started up again. A pro-sex movement had started and her images were splattered everywhere. She was the face of a movement that she had no idea was even happening. She had no legal team to ensure that she collected royalties when her images were used. So when she was released, she still had no money, despite the fact that her name and face were seen everywhere. She stayed in a halfway house for people with mental illnesses, reintegrating into society. That is where Hugh Hefner found her, and he invited her to dinner at his mansion. It was there that he realized she wasn't making any money from her own image, including when he featured her in the Playboy magazine. He put her in touch with an estate lawyer that handled stars like James Dean. All of a sudden, Betty had more money than she knew what to do with it. But really, she was not interested. She did not want to be famous again or rich and in the tabloids. She lived out the rest of her life in a halfway house. When Betty was arrested and sentenced to a mental hospital, she was diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic. Most people believe that the trauma she suffered when she was younger led to a mental breakdown. When she was married to her third husband, it was reported that she was highly paranoid and would occasionally have hallucinations. Others try to attribute her whole career to the abuse when she was younger. They say that she only did it because she was mentally ill. No self-respecting woman would ever model like that. Of course, this theory is only a theory and only held by conservatives who generally don't believe that women have the right over their own bodies. Betty passed away in 2008 from pneumonia. She had given a few interviews after being released, but she asked not to be photographed or filmed. She wanted to be remembered as she was in her golden years. She never had any children and had very few visitors late in life. Supposedly, her sisters did not want to speak to Betty after she spoke out about their abuse. They never wanted anyone to know what happened to them, and they never forgave her for that. Betty's estate still earns money off her image, and if you look around, you will see her everywhere, in the way certain photos are posed or in anyone who wears those dark bangs. For someone who never wanted to be famous, she certainly left quite a legacy. So interesting to read all this information about Bettie Page. I honestly didn't really know much about her, and it's so shocking to read that she spent most of her life in a halfway house and that she never really wanted to be famous. So I found this so interesting. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the big red button below. Follow me on Instagram, Dallies in the Attic, and make sure you check out my YouTube membership. And with this membership, you get a bonus monthly video. This is behind the scenes, and you also get a bonus live stream and 20% off Vintage Doll Cosmetics, my vintage inspired beauty brand. So I'll also link this below. All right, I'll see you soon. Bye.